Hi everyone, it's William with the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary and Correspondence series. Today we're doing an entry, a letter section from 1939. We're back to 1939. The previous was 1915. And I'm in the apartment here at XIII. I didn't angle my tripod right, I can see now, but I'm not going to worry about that. I will be departing XIII on Tuesday, so the clock is definitely ticking, and you and I both are going to have to get used to doing videos without this exhausted peasant woman in the background. I'm referring to this painting. I didn't like it at first. It's kind of grown on me, although it makes me tired looking at her. And I hope she's just tired. I hope she's not having some kind of existential crisis. But anyway, our recap for 1915, well, it was all about sleigh driving and sledding. But oddly enough, also Dmitri reading a novel that is about not just revolution, but the bloodiness of revolution. That was Anatole France's The Gods Will Have Blood. Les deux en soif. That's not going to be helpful to you because of my pronunciation. Okay, and so the last time we did 1939, we had the conclusion of Grunwald's advice to Maria about how she should come back to Europe and talk to various people about getting a monthly income. Okay, our cast for today. Wow, this may be it may not be the biggest, but it may be the most varied and interesting group of people. They're not present, but anyway, we have, to begin with, Hitler, then Pontius Pilate, then Goering, then Stalin, then Princess Elizabeth, the future Elizabeth II, and Princess Margaret. And finally, we have a lesser-known person. This is Stalin. I'm frustrated with myself that I didn't make sure to remind myself what his Christian name was before I started the video, because I think it was Mikhail. I'm pretty sure, but I'm not 100% sure. So anyway, that's the cast, and you will see how they all come together. And this is a very long one because I really wanted to, Dmitri doesn't even come into this one by name. I really wanted to do all of this at once, all of this pre-Dmitri part at once. And once in the next, following this, the next paragraphs, you'll find out why this is so important and how Dmitri, and one of the most important reasons why Stalin is telling Maria all this is because of Dmitri's place within this new universe of politics and diplomacy and what's the crisis that the world has already entered. Okay, so here we go. And then one fine day, I'm starting in the middle of it. Rarely has one seen in the lives of any people such a complete turnaround as that which has occurred with respect to Russia since my last letter to Your Imperial Highness. Our homeland seemed threatened by a terrible danger of a type not seen for 3 centuries. Abandoned by the entire world, it seemed like it was predestined to fall prey to the appetites of the German conquerors. During a very frank conversation I had at the beginning of January with one of the most influential figures at the Quai d'Orsay, I got a clear impression that people in Paris were delighted to see the German armies turning towards the east. They'll go in, I was told, and then we'll see. What would we have seen? Perhaps the partition of Russia? I was told that the British diplomats in Central Europe were expressing the same view. Peace in Europe was to be saved even at the cost of dismembering Russia. And then, one fine day, Hitler's entry into Prague upset the whole situation and put an abrupt end to all this Pontius Pilate-style tranquility. It is almost certain that if Hitler had been able to attack Poland or Romania directly without affecting the integrity of Czechoslovakia, the Western powers would not have moved. Was it then an unforgivable carelessness that he committed, as is commonly claimed, in breaking the Munich Pact? I do not believe so. It seemed to me that he could not have acted otherwise. In a moment when he let his guard down, Goering explained Germany's conduct in this way. For our future undertakings, he said, we need all our divisions, right down to the last one. We cannot leave a single one behind. Faced with the immensity of their plans, the Germans were obliged to act exactly as responsible leaders act during a war on the eve of an offensive. We call up every last person we find in the reserves without making an exception for the one-eyed or hunchbacked. Hitler's mistake, we now know, was not having foreseen the reaction of England, who saw that she was deceived and scorned. Her eyes were suddenly opened. She grasped the immense danger that threatened her empire, and she decided to act. Now it is a life or death struggle. Hitler will be blocked by peaceful means. Blocked. Should it be blocked or blockaded? I think blockaded. And now I've lost my place. Yes, Hitler will be blocked or blockaded by peaceful means if he allows himself to be influenced and convinced by warlike means if it is otherwise. I recently made 2 extended stays in London, once at Christmas and a second time toward the end of May when I attended the wedding of my youngest son. I stayed at the Soblins both times and was installed in the same room Your Imperial Highness occupied last year, so I often thought about you, madam. The change that took place in the English mentality between my 2 trips is simply indescribable. The beautiful dream of friendship with Germany had vanished, evaporated. The leopard was showing its claws. During my second stay, I had a great number of political conversations in the most diverse circles. There was no longer any talk of Germany and Hitler. The matter was closed. There was no talk of France. The French alliance was also closed. The only topic of conversation, whether it was with the most powerful or the most humble people, the only topic that fascinated Parliament, the clubs, and the press was Russia. A Russia that had to join the coalition against the totalitarian countries at all costs. I said to one of my interlocutors, if Stalin demands Princess Elizabeth as the price of the alliance, the English will give her to him. My interlocutor, a foreigner, it goes without saying, but a very intelligent man, replied, no, because Princess Elizabeth may become queen, but they would give him little Margaret Rose. It's obvious that in such an atmosphere, the talks on the alliance have every chance of success, unless Stalin has some ulterior motive that we don't know about yet. It's incontestable that the development of British policy since March holds immense advantages for Russia. The miracle I called for at the end of my last letter has come to pass. Whatever the outcome of the Anglo-Soviet talks, the guarantee given by England and France to Poland and Romania now bars the invaders' path. Poland will fight if necessary. The march through Galicia no longer looks like it will be a military promenade, no matter what happens. Okay, so that's the last before Dmitri comes into the picture. And I should add, since he talks about having been in London at the end of May, I should have said from the beginning that this letter is dated the 3rd of June. So he'd only just gotten back. So this was all very fresh. Okay, so I would say that he was definitely involved in intelligence gathering. I mean, maybe more or less, or as a dilettante, but he had all these connections in diplomatic circles. He had been a diplomat himself, and was he cashing in? Was he answering specific requests? For instance, what are people saying here or there? What's this or that person saying? I don't know, but it's clear, certainly in relation to Dmitri, even more so than we've seen before, that he was keeping his eyes open and gathering whatever information he could. Okay, the reference to Russia hasn't had a crisis like this for 3 centuries. He's talking about an event in Russian history. Well, not a one-day event, but an event that dragged on, called the Smuta, which followed the death without heirs of Ivan the Terrible of Russia, Ivan IV. He was part of the Rurik dynasty. He wasn't a Romanov. His wife had been a Romanov, but there were no heirs, and so Russia was plunged into this very dangerous and very horrible and bloody time when you had all kinds of pretenders to the throne, not all of them Russian, especially you had Polish interference, and so that was something that has never been erased from Russian memory, even though it happened, in the 17th century, and it ended in 1613 when the first Romanov, Mikhail, came to the throne. So that's what he's referring to. The reference to the Quai d'Orsay, that was, I suppose, still is the where all of the diplomacy, the diplomatic arm of the French government is headquartered. So any reference to the Quai d'Orsay has to do with diplomacy. The invasion of Czechoslovakia actually happened in March 1939. As I said, it's now June, so it's a few months old. And before that, in September 1938, there was the Munich Peace Agreement, very famous because Neville Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, returned, and when he descended from the plane, still at the airfield, he declared that they had achieved peace in our time. And there was now peace in our time because they'd brokered this treaty with Hitler. And so the reference to Pontius Pilate is interesting because it's sort of saying that before the invasion of Czechoslovakia, France and Britain, they kind of had this Pontius Pilate relationship to Russia, which would sort of make Russia Christ, right? But Pontius Pilate washing his hands of the whole thing, saying, I don't have any problem with this man, but I wash my hands of it and let his blood be on your hands, on somebody else's hands but mine. And so what Grunwald is saying is that England at that time was ready to sacrifice Russia if Germany would turn eastward and attack Russia. Okay, I don't know if that's true or not, but and he makes this reference to Goering. And that's interesting because Goering was, I can't give you, actual dates, but Goering was a big presence in France, in Paris, before the war started, because he was a man who greatly admired anything aristocratic and wanted to be an aristocrat, and he loved in particular to hang out with the white Russian aristocrats and to party and feel very grand. And so it could very well be that Grunwald had met him at some Russian emigre ball or something like that. Dmitri had certainly met him, and the story about how later he would steal Dmitri's trains, his model railroad. And yes, what next? I see. So this whole section, I don't really understand what Grunwald is getting at about Hitler's hand being forced, about people thinking that, he just, this was just a careless thing on his part to then go into Czechoslovakia. I don't think you could call it just sort of an oversight. A careless oversight. Yeah, I forgot that I wasn't supposed to do that. And then this reference to his hand being forced. Why? Why was his hand forced? And how does it go together with what Goering says, and with this idea that You know, if you're a good, responsible military leader, then you, in a situation like this, you call up all your reserves, including the one-handed and hunchback people. But it seems to be saying that, yeah, from a strategic standpoint, for what Germany's goals are, this seemed like the right thing to do. It wasn't, but it seemed like the right thing to do. And that's being sort of very, just looking at it in a very dispassionate way. Like we would look at it nowadays, talking about, was that a smart move on Hitler's part to bypass Moscow and go straight to the oil fields, or was it disastrous? We can talk about it dispassionately, and that seems to be what Grunwald is doing here, but I don't follow his reasoning. So anyway, yes. Here I do follow his reasoning. Hitler definitely messed up in relation to England. That was, that he just completely didn't foresee that. And then later on, he didn't foresee the U.S. coming into the war. In both instances, he thought, he had fans in those countries, and they weren't going to do anything. And so he completely misread the British and their outlook and their mindset, their outlook and their mindset. So that's we all know that. That's clear from history, just how badly he was mistaken there. Okay, Stalin, whom I think was Mikhail, he was an interesting figure in London. You find him also in Dmitri's diary entries for 1920, doing the same thing that he's doing now. I guess there must have been donations from wealthy emigres, or God only knows who, because they had this house. It was called Russia House, and in London, and it was Stalin had been the ambassador to London, the Russian ambassador, and after the revolution happened, he just stayed in London. And, they acquired this house to be their embassy. So it was the Imperial Russian Embassy in London. But of course, it was not acknowledged as the Russian embassy because England, by this point, had long since, and the other countries had long since recognized the Soviet Union as a legitimate state. And at this particular time, as Stalin says, they were actually actively courting Soviet Russia. Anyway, so it was a place where it's not surprising that Maria had stayed there, that Grunwald was staying there. If you were an important Russian emigre, you could go and stay there and ask for advice. Stalin had in 1920 helped Dmitri with visas and things like that. And in 1938, both Dmitri and Maria spent time in England, and there's a picture that was published in the Tatler, so I can't post it, unfortunately, because it's copyright protected, but of Dmitri attending an embassy ball at Russia House. And he's obviously, 3 sheets to the wind, as my grandmother would have said. So he's drunk. He looks like he's just about to slide under the table. And he looks just horrible, my friends, because he's just emaciated. He's obviously dying of the tuberculosis. I don't know how he was still on his feet. And there's another picture where he looks even worse at a charity function in London that Maria was part of. And there's a picture there of him with some of his Greek cousins, and yeah, he's just skin and bones. Anyway, that's by the by. So then you have this reference to the princesses, the little princesses, Elizabeth and Margaret, and joking around. He probably wouldn't have dared made that joke with an English person, but with this foreigner, whoever it was. Oh yeah, the English that need this alliance so badly. The British need this alliance so badly that if Stalin wanted, them to give him Princess Elizabeth, they would do it. And yeah, no. Maybe Margaret. Of course, this is a complete joke, right? Anyway, I think overall, the last part of this, at least, I think overall is a good assessment and an interesting one. And, speaking of military promenades, There was just one in the U.S. this weekend, and I haven't watched it. I'm not going to watch it. I'm glad I wasn't even in the country while that was going on. But anyway, enough said about that. At the moment, the world at the moment is quite a scary place. I don't know if it's necessarily less scary than it was in June 1939. Maybe a little bit. You know, whenever you have psychopaths at the head of governments, that's scary. And it's good to keep in mind that it's scary. Okay, next time for 1915, we will have a visit to Ilinskaya. We'll have more about the arsenic treatment, and we'll have more French literature, a different French author. So, you know, I was thinking, well, if Dmitri was a modern prince and he decided to go to university, you know, maybe he would have majored in political science with a minor in French literature. But, okay, that's silly. He's not irrelevant. Irrelevant to think about what he would be doing nowadays, because his life would have been completely different. Okay, so and next time with 1939, well, we plunge fully into this just fascinating letter, the rest of the letter that talks about Dmitri and Vladimir Kirillovich. So at that time called Grand Duke Vladimir, the son of Cyril, who'd been the emperor, the self-proclaimed emperor in exile. I don't think Vladimir ever called himself that. But anyway, it's talking about Dmitri's take on all of this. It's talking about Vladimir's take on all of this. It's talking about how Dmitri and Vladimir are interacting, and I can tell you there, at least on Dmitri's part, and I think also on Vladimir, there's really no love lost between the two of them. But anyway, that is absolutely fascinating. As I said, I'm leaving Davos on Tuesday, overnighting in Zurich, then taking the train to Paris the next day, overnighting there, hopefully catching a flight out of Paris on Thursday. And yeah, so I don't think I'll be able to do anything either on, today is Sunday, I don't think I'll be able to do anything either on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and probably not for a couple days after that, but I may be able to tomorrow, and that would be the 1915 diary entry. So I will hopefully see you next time. Bye.